Welcome back to God and Gaming. Today I'm going to be working on some cooking, so I thought it'd be appropriate to keep my Bible study along the lines of some foodage. It's always a good thing. So first I'm going to take up some of these portable ranges, so I can come out here and cook my food by the bank instead of walking all around. See how much experience I can get with this. So, my study today, I wanted to pick it up in 1 Kings, so chapter 17, verses 7 through 16. So Elijah's running through some places here. So sometime later the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him, "Go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon, and stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food." So he went to Zarephath, where he came to the town gate. A widow was gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, "Would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink?" As she was going to get it, he called, "And bring me, please, a piece of bread." So he's getting right into asking her, and this is a widow, and at the time these widows were not well taken care of. There was, especially in the Israel culture, there was a type of welfare system where they were supposed to take care of widows and people, the fatherless widows. However, in other cultures, and this was another culture, they didn't have the same welfare in place. So this is very rough, and this is in the middle of a famine too. It seems, we got a brook dried up. There's no rain in the land. It's a really rough time, and he asked her for some bread, which is wild. "As surely as the Lord your God lives," she replied, "I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." So she's not saying she's going to poison them. She's basically saying that this is their last meal, and she's going to make it so they can eat it before they're going to starve to death. And that's kind of what's getting ready to happen there. So, it's kind of a rough spot to be in. So she's basically telling him, "I cannot make you no food, my friend." So I find that interesting. And Elijah said to her, "Do not be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first make a small lot of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. Then make something for yourself and your son. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." This is a big promise, and she had some idea of who the God of Israel is, because she did reference him as surely as the Lord your God lives. So she understands the God of Israel, which means she's probably heard the stories of, what happened when they left Egypt, how God supplied for them, the battles they've won, even from the battle where Moses is just holding up his arms and they're winning against the enemy. There's a lot of stories and, things that go behind that she's probably aware of and she's heard of, maybe never seen firsthand, but she's definitely heard of these things. So, and you gotta understand, is the spot she's in. It's gotta take a lot of faith to do something like that. See, if you heard these stories, you gotta understand this is at a time where a lot of stories were going around about gods and wars and all kinds of stuff. So she's probably used to hearing this stuff to some degree, and this isn't nothing new. So this is a huge leap of faith if she does it, but we'll find out. So, and this is a good promise too. He basically says this is going to happen. It's going to be full until the rain comes on the land. So she went and did as Elijah had told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken to Elijah. I really like this because this woman basically goes out there every day, and she makes this bread, and see real quick. My apologies. So she goes and makes this bread, and like you'd think, why didn't, if this was going to be a promise that God had for her, was there possibly maybe it would have helped if God would have filled this jar to the brim till the oil was overflowing, and you're like, whoa, this is definitely from God. But he basically filled it just enough each day to make one more loaf, one more loaf, one more loaf. Almost like tomorrow's not promised. Almost like it's a picture, you know, it's like there's a lot of times where we have problems with things and we ask for God to help us and we get a little bit of help. It's like, man, I wish this was more. I wish this was more frequent or more common, or this was happening more. But sometimes God gives you just enough. That's kind of the sign there when she's making this bread. She has just enough for the day for her family and for Elijah. And that's a really good thing. So it's a miracle, and you know, she's basically taking care of a foreigner in her house and relying on a God that she's heard of. So it's amazing that even though you can kind of see her attitude's a little bit off, like she still doubts in some way, it does take a lot of faith to take a stranger into your house and cook meals for them. So kudos to her for that, and her faith was repaid. But like I said, it was repaid in just enough for each day she had to rely on Elijah, and it's a picture of how we should rely on God. You know, we should always rely on God, and you know, even we just get enough for the day, that's fine. Keep coming to God. That thing's going to keep refilling, and it's going to keep refilling. It's going to keep refilling as long as we keep relying on God. So it's kind of the idea of this bread being cooked here. So let's kind of find out what happens next. That's as far as I was going to read. I want to go on. Sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill. He grew worse and worse and finally stopped breathing. She said to Elijah, What do you have against me, man of God? Do you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son? So I'm assuming Elijah being in this house, I mean, he's been there for a while because they're making bread every day. They've probably had conversations. He's probably explained a lot more about God and a relationship with God to her. As Christians, it's kind of our job too. We're supposed to give an example through our lives for other people to see, but also share the good news, you know, share the good news. And this time Jesus Christ hadn't came around. However, the faith was still the same, and, you know, our good news, you know. I was talking to a buddy of mine where I was giving some of my testimony, and I was talking about other people, and he was like, you know, you're very, I forget the word he used, but it didn't seem quite right. But in a way, he basically said, I'm very forgiving to people. And my answer was, you know, in all honesty, I feel the need to because I've been forgiven. You know, I can forgive other people. I can see a lot of times when people are acting a certain way or behaving a certain way, I don't get upset. I think there's a reason. You know, there's a guy I used to work with way back when, and people really disliked him. Really, really disliked him. And they all said bad things about him. But, you know, getting to know him, I had known that he had a really rough upbringing. And there was a lot in his life that led him to be the way he is. And no excuse. No excuse. He still was who he was. However, I understood it. And therefore, I was willing to work through it. And, you know, get to know the real him versus just write him off as, well, this is just who he is. And so my buddy was telling me, you know, you're very forgiving. And the reason I am very forgiving is because I've been forgiven, and I know I'm not a perfect person. I know I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. I've hurt people. I'm definitely not a good person. You know, I'm not a good person. But, you know, it's the Holy Spirit in me that convicts me to do right things and to do a course correction and guide me. So when I'm around people, I want my work ethic. I want my compassion. I want my ability to forgive to be something that sticks out. People are like, why? And it gives me the opportunity to open up and talk about the reason why, because it's not because Nolan's a good person, because we know Nolan's not a good person. And but I have a Savior who saved me and forgave me. And out of everything, this was a free gift. You know, my job is to share that Savior with other people, to forgive them and to be caring and you know, spread that around. So anyway, so now she's upset at him, and she's kind of like at a point in this walk with him where he's probably been talking to her about God, and she's been learning a little bit, but still probably not exactly believing because, like I said again, she's been around other gods. She's had other gods in her life, and everything's going good. She's getting her a little bit of bread to rely on the Lord and her son and her being taken care of in some way, shape, or form. But now it gets to a point where it's heating up a little bit. It's definitely heating up a little bit. So now we have it heating up. And it kind of breaks that relationship, breaks everything that maybe Elijah was saying at the time, where he's talking about, God will provide this daily amount. Because, look at her response. Sometime later, the woman who owned the house grew worse. He grew ill. Her son grew ill. He grew worse and worse. And finally, she said, "What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" So he's probably been pointing out what sin is and what's against God. And she probably is convicted to some degree of, she's convicted of some degree of what she's doing is wrong and what she's been doing is wrong. So now there's a tumultuous spot where her relationship with God is being questioned. She's questioning him, like, "Oh, okay, you fed my family, and everything's been well and good. You've been eating, we've been eating, but now all of a sudden my son's sick. What's the point of you feeding my family if you knew, if your God is so powerful? Is this because I sinned? You're forgiving God who, has guided Israel and been gentle with Israel and gave Israel all this knowledge, is all of a sudden going to punish me for my sin?" So I think that that's kind of the mindset she's taken. "But give me your son," Elijah replied. He took him from her arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his bed. And he cried out to the Lord, "Lord my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I'm staying with, by causing her son to die?" Then he stretched out on the boy 3 times and cried out to the Lord, "Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." I wonder about this a lot. I wondered, how long he was up there. Did the stretching out on him take one little trip? Did it take 2 little trips? Was it something that was done a lot? Was it, like how much time? We read it and almost seems instantaneously, and it might have been really quick. But even Elijah doesn't know the answer, and that's his faith in God. And we don't always get the answer when we cry out to God, when we want an answer from God. And Elijah, who's very close to God, who was doing his work and his will, and God was providing for him in amazing ways, doesn't really know why. He doesn't. And that's fine, it happens. We need to understand that we're not always going to get an answer in these things. So now we're up in this room, and time's passing, and it says that he had to stretch himself out 3 times, which means, he was being consistent. There's a part in the Bible where God basically sends a prophet to talk to a king of Israel, and the guy tells him, strike the arrow on the ground, and that's when you're going to defeat your enemies. The guy's like, "Okay, 1, 2, 3. He's like, dude, you just struck that arrow like 5 or 6 times, and you would have crushed all your enemies. But he didn't have the zeal. He was like, "Okay, fine, 1, 2, 3." He just did the motions, and he hit the arrow 3 times on the ground. Versus like, "Wait, you said God's going to provide for me? If I hit this on the ground, my enemies will be defeated." Pop, 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 and just keep striking it, because he knew that God is the source and God's going to keep his promise. So he only hit it 3 times on the ground, and because of that, he only defeated 3 of his enemies. So this is Elijah. He didn't just stretch out once and take for granted his relationship with God. Like, "Okay, Lord, I stretch out over this boy." When it says he stretched himself out on the boy, a lot of people think maybe he was on top of him. I think he was over him, stretched on top of him, praying and begging God to bring him back. That's just the way I picture it. I could be wrong. And it didn't just happen once, and when it didn't happen the first time he asked, he did it again, and he did it again. And there's an explanation point on this when he's saying, he cried out, "Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." He's really pouring it out and yelling to God, bring it before God, stretching out over this boy. The Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elijah picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house. He gave him to his mother and said, "Look, your son is alive." So the Lord heard Elijah's cry. God hears us. Sometimes it may not feel it, and you gotta understand is Elijah cried out 3 times. I know that you can be like, well, I've cried out 50 times. Well, keep crying out because God listens and he hears you. Sometimes God's timing's a little bit different. Sometimes God has different plans, and our prayers don't exactly line up with it. However, they will. They will. As long as you're praying within God's will, and the Holy Spirit convicts you, it gives you what to pray for. It tells you what you should be praying for. And, this right here is amazing. God heard him, and God hears us. He carries him down, son, look, your son is alive. And so this is coming from a woman who is pagan, who knows about God, who's probably heard the stories, to actually seeing some of the miracles firsthand and hearing about, you see the good side of God. You see like, oh, well, there's miracles. Wow, this is great. I love the feel-good part of Christianity. It makes my heart feel great. But there's also the conviction part where it's like, I have been living outside of a structure that is bad for me and not beneficial. And, you start to be convicted, and that's the not so fun part of Christianity. However, when you embrace it, there's sometimes where, you have to give up part of who you were or what you've done or who you were in the past. And it sucks because you're like, well, wait, this is just me. I shouldn't have to give this up. This is just who I am. Sometimes giving that up is better for you. Hindsight is 100%, 20/20. There we go. That's the saying. Hindsight is 20/20. You can see your best when you're looking back, and God sees the future. He knows what's good for you. He knows what's bad for you. And even though you can't see the reason why that you shouldn't be doing this or shouldn't have your life like this, God does. And trusting in him, that's exactly what they had to do. They had a little bit in that jar every day. They had to trust in God, regardless of how silly it seemed. Like, well, I'm going to make this bread today, and I'm actually out. But you wake up the next morning, like, there's enough to make another loaf. That's amazing. That's kind of how our life is when we're chipping away at the old self and we're pruning the branches to let the tree grow stronger, and so we can bear fruit. And we got to cut those bad branches they're preventing the fruit from growing. They're suffocating the nutrients that are supposed to be going to the fruit. So this woman, now back to my point, she's learning about sin. And she's like, well, you're punishing me now, God. Sometimes it feels like that. Sometimes it's like, well, God, I got to give up my life. This is a punishment to me. But we don't see the reward at the end of it. We don't see it. And we a lot of times give up because the now satisfaction feels like it outweighs the benefits of the later reward. And the woman's response once her son was saved, then the woman said to Elijah, now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth. So this is her coming to God moment at this point. She understands, like, not only do the stories of your God exist out there, but I've seen it firsthand of the miracles, of the way he provides and the way he takes care of us. And then on top of that, I watched in my house, but even when things got bad, you told me what my sin was. You told me what I did wrong against your God. And even when I lost everything, even when I lost my son and I felt I was being punished for my sin, you showed me a way out. And it shows Elijah's dedication by reaching out 3 times and crying out to the Lord. And he just didn't stop. When we're hitting that arrow, let's hit that arrow on the ground as much times as we can. When God provides for us, let's fully let God provide for us. Let's not try to muddy it up. Let's not get in the way of what God has for us. A lot of the time we get in our own way by living life the way we wanted, by trying to incorporate our desires into our walk with God. In a lot of ways, we muddy it up, and we mess it up. So let God do what God does best and provide for you. Do the work by, changing the parts of your life you need to and having faith. And even when it's a little bit and you only have just enough to get through the day, worry about today. Tomorrow will worry about itself, Anyway, so that's my my cooking video in RuneScape with my God in gaming. And I wanted to kind of mix in a cooking chapter, even though it kind of went on a different direction. I wanted to provide that and get through that. So thank you to everyone who listened. It's a little bit shorter of a video than some of my others lately. I hope everyone's having a blessed day, and take it easy.